I'm Nora Segura-Barpal, she, her pronouns, Executive Director and co-founder of the Music Inclusion Coalition.
And I'm Alma Ramos, pronouns she, hers, and I'm the CEO of Full Bloom Consulting.
The Preservation Project podcast and archive were created to uplift artistic voices of dissent. Art is an important part of preserving our voices, our culture, and our history. We created this podcast as a platform to share information, encourage artists to continue making art that represents their communities, and to talk about the place art has in protests throughout history. The archive is intended to ensure that these stories live on and that our voices can't be erased. We have always been here. We will always be here. Your art, your joy, your existence is an act of protest, and that is absolutely beautiful. The Music Inclusion Coalition is a 501c3. Your donations ensure we can continue our work, and they are tax deductible. If you have the ability, please, please, please consider donating and helping us continue this project.
So here we go, talking about none other than our love for the one, the only, Lady Gaga, or known as Lady Gaga, or Gaga, or Gaga, or Gaga, or I can't remember the last one.
The fact that truly her name is 2 syllables and she is her own lexicon of words is insane. Like, the fact that she has transcended language, like she is her own language and her own culture. It's incredible. And within, like, especially the queer community, I think she really is her own entire genre of art. It's not like it's beyond
100%
what anyone else is doing, I feel like.
Yes. I'm just blown away about not just the talent that she has in that little teeny tiny body, because I think she's only like 5'2", 5'1", something like that. She had a documentary called like 5 foot something. But she's super tiny, but the versatility that she also has had throughout her career, it's interesting because in her iHeartRadio acceptance speech for the Innovator Award, she talked about people like Cher and Madonna, who are so well known for their different eras of recreating themselves, right? And having like almost like a whole new image. I mean, Cher alone has so many different eras of herself. And I feel like Lady Gaga did that, but in her own way, from being like the Just Dance girl to like the then going to, the Fame Monster, where she does like Bad Romance. And I even remember that, was it Joanna album that she did, which was like a little bit more like alternative-y, hipstery type of mode. Of course, Born This Way. Then she started doing some acting. Like, it's just so much talent and intentionality in this tiny little human that I have so much respect for. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, she has been such an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community since I remember her coming out. Like, I remember her being out there.
I feel like she faced so much backlash early 100%. On. And like, we can talk about, I have so many points to make with this. I mean, even the fact that right now Chapel Rowan has come out as like, she is a drag queen that is like, from the moment she started her art, she said that she was a character, she is a drag queen. But Lady Gaga, even though she is like, that wasn't the terminology that anyone was using. So it was like, oh, she's just this weird girl. She's doing this thing. And like, people were so nasty. And now we're like celebrating Chapel Rowan. But really, like, I think had she framed it that way, or had like society framed it that way, it would have been completely different. Because, and I think a huge part of that is the association with masculinity versus she was a woman doing this, even though she also is a queen and a drag queen all on her own. So I think that that's one interesting thing. I just always remember, and I think that this was something that to me has always shaped the way I do equity work and like my mindset in being part of a community and in being an ally for a community was the video she did where one of the interviewers was like, yeah, well, everyone's saying that you're trans, that you're actually a man. And she was like, so what if I am? And they were like, so you're not going to dispel the rumors? And she was like, why do you care? She was like, if I dispel the rumors, then I'm saying that that there's something wrong with this. Like, I'm defending myself versus just like if it were like an actual genuine question from like an individual where you're like, oh, is this like you're having a conversation, right? Like that could be a totally different situation. But she's like, if I'm on a national stage, if I'm answering this question, it's in defense and therefore it's saying that this is a bad thing. And like, I'm not going to do that to this community. Like, who cares what I have going on down there? I am a performer. And it's so deeply shaped. I remember that like, because that was like a while ago now, and I feel like it just shaped the way that I see equity work and like how we approach various communities and how we approach communities when we have like a platform. And just like the grace she showed in that and the brilliance. And I think she's also an artist that has always known her fans and her community and never 100%. Sold them out, where there's so many artists, I feel like, that start in the queer community, get support from queer people. The YMCA, let's talk about, that's like the perfect tie-in, right? Like all of the original Village people, except for the one straight man, have passed. And so the one straight guy is now being like, you can't associate me with that community. Like that's never what it was about. He got his fame because of queer people, because of our community. And then was like, as soon as everyone that was queer around him died, he's like, oh, just kidding. I'm totally not okay with that. And so like,
I think he also went to a Trump rally too. The inauguration for him. Yeah.
And he totally endorsed Trump using that music. He's been saying that that's not what the YMCA was about, that he'll sue anyone that says it was. When like, again, it's like that rewriting of history that we spoke about last week. It's the, like all of it. But that's one thing I just so deeply love and respect about Lady Gaga is that she has never sold out her community. No. And she like knows who she writes for. And it's great if everyone likes it, but I just feel like she could release something that absolutely tanked. But if the queer community loved it, she would see that as a success. Is like, it is just, and like, I'm not Lady Gaga. I don't know her personally, but as a like person that has seen her in the public eye so much, I do genuinely feel like that's her takeaway and like that's who she is. And I love that about her.
I mean, she's just such an individual. And I think that's why, like, she's not afraid to be herself. She's always been very, like, from the beginning. I mean, I remember the freaking meat outfit that she had. I think it was at the MTV Music Awards. That time that she did come in an award show, like, on a shell. When it was, like, or not a shell, an egg. And then I remember the Met Gala.
Act with, like, the bleeding.
Yes. And then I remember the Met Gala when it was the camp one, and as soon as I saw that Lady Gaga was going to be there, I was like, this is who she is. Like, she is camp. Like, this is something that she has invested time in this community, and you can tell, like, it's not her putting on an act. Like, this is her being herself. And I do think Lady Gaga's like exactly what you mentioned with like Chappell Roan, which we'll get back to. I definitely want to make a point about that too. But she is someone who from the beginning has said like, yeah, I'm the weird girl. And that is fine. Like, and that is just who I am. And I'm not the only weird one out here. We are all freaking weird. Where everyone who's weird is amazing. And like everyone who's been picked on because they're different is amazing, which I feel like so much of that, which we'll definitely have to talk about Wicked at some point too. But I feel like so much of that is like, it resonates so much with the queer community who has just been ostracized since, I'm not going to say the beginning of time because that really just depends on the culture, but has been ostracized for centuries because of who they are and nothing to do with their actions, right? Or them being like a bad person or anything like that. So I feel like she just gave permission to anyone who is consuming her content to be their full selves, to not feel like they have to put on a front, and just truly express themselves fully.
I also just want to touch on, sorry, just real quick, I want to touch on that, the fact that our society has ostracized the queer community, but then is like so apt to consume that same community. Like there, you know, I think that there is such a phenomenon, especially with straight women, of feeling cool because they are consuming queer media, and like being near it is a coolness. And then you have like straight men trying to be near straight women. So it's like this commodification of our culture, and there's like this whole cultural queerness conversation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I apologize. Our sound person, Josh, is going to hate me because I just clicked my pen in agreement and like pushed it down.
Also, by the way, when we reference Josh is behind the scenes. We do this. So now you're all in on the secret. It's Josh running all of this.
You can thank Josh for how great we look and sound and all of that. But let's get into this, Nora, because that is absolutely correct. There's so much from mainstream media that is only cool and popular because the LGBTQ community has referenced it or has used this language or has provided this type of entertainment for such a long time. I think one of the documentaries that really showcased like, wow, like mainstream media is so behind on language is I watched Paris is Burning, which if anyone has not watched that documentary, it's about the Black and Latine ballroom culture and community in New York, I believe in the 80s. And they were saying things like, ooh, read her, or slay, or like all the rhetoric that we use now, that's been used since the 80s.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it, too, has come out of specifically the Black community within the queer community. And I think there's even like this deeper commodification within the queer community in these different levels, which Pose, if you've seen Pose, if you haven't, definitely check out Pose. It is one of my like all-time favorite shows. But
agreed.
This like commodification, these levels within that, where again, trans women across the board are always treated the worst, and trans women of color, but like the community that they built, like they are the ones who took, between them and especially lesbians of color, that took care of men during the AIDS epidemic, that like, you know, absolutely, you know, built the community and took care of the community and were house mothers and like all of these pieces that, you know, I've seen a lot of conversations in the queer community lately about like why the L comes first in LGBTQ+. And like so many of my older male gay friends are like, because they are the community, like they took care of us. They made sure that those of us that are alive are like, you know. And then you also have people, which we've referenced before, like Marsha P. Johnson, who she started Stonewall. She is the movement. And to like take that out of the history books, or to say like that's not, that trans women aren't part of this culture, or that we should drop the T, like that is the culture. Like we have all co-opted that culture from the beginning, and we've commodified it. And I just think that that's so important. And that's one thing, just to tie it back to Gaga, that I do love about her is I don't ever feel like, and you know, I am just one person in the queer community, so other people can feel other types of ways, but I don't feel like she has ever she's never commodified us. She has never tokenized us. She has never cherry picked the community, but she has learned I don't actually know if she considers herself part of the community or not, really. I believe she does. Okay, great. I thought so, but I wasn't like 100% sure, so I didn't want to say that. But like and even being part of that, you can still cherry pick, you can still commodify, you can still 100%. Steal from other people. And I just feel like all she does is pay like homage to and uplift voices.
Yes.
Versus overstepping and overreaching.
Yeah, she has always given people their flowers, right? Like she has always acknowledged the community and has always stood up for the community. Like she has this understanding that when she's in these spaces, regardless of her being a woman who is also disabled, a woman who is queer, she still has so much power through her presence and platform alone. And she has always been an advocate for the queer community. And she's always been an advocate for social justice in general, like activism. Obviously, she's had a big emphasis on the queer community because, one, she's a part of it, and two, she has expressed how, loving and caring and how that community has taken her in and really helped her build her confidence. In that iHeartRadio speech, she talks about like the LGBTQ community and thank you for showing me what bravery is, right? Like showing me before I knew it myself. And she is not one to just pretend that this is how she's always been or that she's oh yeah, like I'm just like she has given that community their praise and has really uplifted us in history now, history back in the day. I mean, even at the Grammys, at the Grammys when she gave her acceptance speech, she even said, trans lives matter, trans life have always been here. They've always been here, they've always existed, and they always will. And nothing about her song or anything like that. It was her duet that she had with Bruno Mars. That song had nothing to do with, like, it wasn't like an outwardly very gay type of song or anything like that.
But she always uses her platform.
Exactly. She's very intentional about it.
And I love that about her. And I think that that's such a flip from some other artists that we see. I think that that's one thing that fell flat for me this year with some of these artists that just aren't about, they're all, talk and there's no action behind it. Yeah. And I think Josh and I were actually talking about this the other day with Chapel Rowan's speech about healthcare and yes, awareness is important and bringing this up is important, but then what do you do next is even more important. And so Olivia Rodrigo actually donated, I think it was $25,000 to a fund for this. And then, and she was pretty public about it. And then Sabrina Carpenter went and donated $50,000 and never said anything. And so it's I think that there's just such a difference in saying it versus actually creating that action. And I think for me, I was a diehard Chapel Rowan person, at the beginning, back 3 years ago before she blew up. And now I'm definitely less on that train because I'm just kind of I'm not seeing at first she was very much into making sure that, that drag queens were performing at all of her shows, local drag queens. And she was giving back to the community. But now that she has so much, I feel that's definitely fallen flat for me of she's ignored smaller award shows that are specific to the queer community or women or BIPOC people. And she could really uplift those award shows or those communities and has just kind of written them off to go and do performances at the VMAs or MTV and just I feel that's been such an interesting turn, especially when she's only where she is because of a lot of support from these communities and also people like Lady Gaga that came before. I think she does give a lot of credit, but there are times where I definitely feel like, you know, it feels very much like she's the first one to do this almost in some ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes. She does, I will say, like, she does looks that are very clearly inspired by certain queens, and she will call them out. 100%. She's called out, you know, your favorite artist, right? Like, she calls out Sasha Colby. So there are some that she does, but I also do think that sometimes it feels a little bit fake to me of, like, I'm an innovator where, you know, and I mean, she's also young, so, like, we'll put that out there, like, she's a younger artist, and she's not being JoJo Siwa. She's not going out there and being like, I'm the first person to ever do gay pop.
Gay pop. It's me. I invented it. I invented gay pop. I'm like, girl, you mean pop? Like, you mean just pop?
Correct. It's already gay.
Yeah.
You just said the quiet part out loud.
Girl, that's pop. That's always like I have a lot to even, like, say. Like, the gay community is I feel like the driving force for pop. Like, I am a stan for, like, I'm not a stan. I love, like, some pop artists. Like, I will admit, like, even for me, I'm, like, more of an R&B girl and, like, love, like, that type of track. And I love pop music. My gay, especially gay male and non-binary and trans friends, when I tell you I cannot say anything bad about their faves, otherwise they will tell me a breakdown of why they are amazing, what they have contributed, and, like, it'll just be even the smallest things, like an outfit or a speech or something like that. Like, it's they are the driving force behind it. So gay pop, not real. It's just pop. It's just pop. It's just pop. But I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, talking about, like, Chappell Roan, and talking about how she's basically personifying herself as, like, a drag queen and all of that. And I do wonder, like what you said, what it would have been like if Lady Gaga had done the same thing. But I feel like it's so much easier now to give praise to drag queens now than back in, like, 2007 or whatever, whenever Lady Gaga came out.
Absolutely. I just think
Drag Race has just come up. Yeah.
Absolutely. I just want to clarify. I do think in part two, it's the branding of it, where that would have been easier for people to wrap their minds around a little bit versus now. But that is a great point, that we did not have the same love for drag queens. But I do think that people at least would have had a better understanding of what she was doing. But I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So I feel like she has... I feel like Chappell has more of a... She can kind of say it out loud way more than with Lady Gaga. She has said it. She will openly say it. But it definitely hasn't been received the same way. Also because you don't see drag queens as publicly, like, Sasha Colby, perfect example. Someone who is literally a huge celebrity and was a celebrity before she even ended up on RuPaul's Drag Race. Like, all of the drag queens on that show were like, oh, so we're not winning this year. So they were like, so this is how it's going to be. And they were absolutely correct, because, oh my God, I do love Miss Anitra, but I knew how this was going to go. But yeah, they have such a bigger platform now and so much more visibility than they had back then. And I don't think I wholeheartedly believe there would be no Chappell Roan without a Lady Gaga. And I don't think that we would have gotten people like Doechii, for example, because she is also very openly queer and very, like, she also identified as a weird kid. She called herself a monster. Like she's a Lady Gaga fan and has been, and like she was seen by Lady Gaga as someone who is also innovative and such an artist. And I think that we're starting to see who are the people that are able to play this game as an artist now and make that same have the same type of status or anything like that, because Lady Gaga has carved that path. And not only is she a queer woman doing that, she is an extremely talented artist. Like, from,
and I think that's something to point out.
Yeah.
Too, is that in order to be successful while also breaking these barriers, you cannot be mediocre in any way. Like, she isn't even slightly bad at anything. She is incredible in everything that she does. And I will say that about Chapel, too. Like, she has an amazing voice. She has 100%. Artistry through the roof. She can create a show. I've seen her live a few times.
Great stage presence.
And so I think for, like, queer artists, that's one thing, too, is they have always had to show up and show out more than anyone else. And that is why they drive the industry. And that's why art, like pop art, is the way it is. I think you're totally right in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
can we talk about her most recent song?
Who? Lady Gaga's?
Chapel Rowan and Lady Gaga.
I haven't
they both
listened
just came
to it.
out.
I was going to be like, abracadabra, abracadabra.
Oh my God.
I wish I knew the choreography. I just know this part, but that song has me in a chokehold. My God.
That is true. Absolutely. So I meant Chapel Rowan's new song, which is
it's country, isn't it?
It's country, although, again, Josh and I were talking about this yesterday when we were putting together the notes for this episode, and it's wild because I think it's hilarious. To me, it also, like, every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is, like, this isn't necessarily, I don't know, it's like this weird mix. I wouldn't say it's not country, but, like, if you played it for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that's country music. So it's like this really, but it's not country. So it's very interesting. It also feels very Gilmore Girls to me, like the theme for Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
But it's so fascinating. We were having this conversation about it, and it has started entering the trad wife, like, TikTok space, where they're using it as, like, a background music because they don't actually know. And again, I think this is, like, a theme within, like, the straight community, right? They, like, co-op our art, but they don't understand it. Where, like, basically this is a song about Chapel Rowan and, like, lesbian topping, basically is my understanding of the song. And so it's, like, this weird thing that's being co-opted by the straight community, but within, like, a specific subset of, like, the trad wife. So it's, like, this Trojan horse, which is the irony of the fact that it's a Trojan horse and Chapel Rowan famously not using Trojans, not lost on me. The irony is just delicious through and through.
So good.
And so it's just iconic to, like, that she can, like, bridge that and, like, pull from all these different genres. She can, like, get into places. And I think that's one of those things that we talk about as, like, people in equity work, is, like, going into spaces where other people can't be. And she is able to be a female drag queen in this major space. And, like, she is in a space, and so is Lady Gaga. And I think that's kind of, you know, they have a seat at the table. And so who do they bring with them? And I think that's one of those things that will be interesting to see as she grows as an artist. That awareness and that education and the fact that they are two different things. And, like, how do you not just say you're about this, but how do you bring people in? How do you bring people along for the ride? How do you educate, and how do you act from there?
Yeah, I definitely feel like this is, because I haven't listened to the song, but I have seen people say that it's a country song. And I saw one TikTok in particular, and I can't remember the name of the person. So if anyone is watching this and they can leave that person's name in the comments, that would be fantastic. But this person was like, interesting. y'all said that Chappell Roan is absolutely a pop artist, and now she's doing country, and you all are having no problems with it, where y'all had big problems with it last year with Beyonce being a pop artist and doing her country album and saying, no, she's not country. But y'all are saying, like, it's okay for Chappell Roan. So it was, like, very much, you know, we know why you all are saying this about Beyonce versus Chappell. So
I think that it's also very interesting because who gets to own country, right? This is something that's coming up too with like the rodeos, cowboys, Western kind of stuff. Like there are so many Latinos that were part of the Wild West that have like never had their history told, never been talked about, that were part of a lot of Native Americans and indigenous communities that were part of this, like, and they've never gotten their recognition. And so like who owns country when country directly pulls from, you know, the same sources that gave us jazz and blues? It's all in the same, like if you go to music school, don't do it, it's terrible. But if you did it, you could pull and be like, these are all the same. They all have the same lineage. And we talk about that with like jazz and blues and where that comes from and rhythm and soul and like, where does this come from? But then like with country, we're like, well, people of color can't do country. And it's like, that's all but
it's ours. Like,
but
you're welcome. Actually.
And it's wild. And I actually had a teacher, a professor, that I got into a whole, the theme of this is I get into arguments with my professors a lot, who tried to argue that country music, like anyone other than white people doing country music was like cultural appropriation. I'm not even kidding. This man also started by saying in class in Spanish, I was conceived in Buenos Aires and therefore I'll speak Spanish if I want to. And I was like, my family is currently in Argentina. Like, that is my lineage. My grandfather was born there. My family is still there. What do you mean you were conceived there? And also, no one's ever told you not to speak Spanish. Like,
also, why are you telling this to your class? What?
That was
weird.
Can
we start with square one? Why is this being brought up in this? I don't need to know that.
But that was the first thing he said. And then we somehow got into anyone else doing country music is cultural appropriation. And I was like, that's not what that word means. And he was like, yeah, well, they got these terrible nicknames, like, coming from Oklahoma when they left during the Depression, like they were called Okies. And I was like, right, but this isn't the same. And so we like had this whole conversation. I don't think this man understood by the end of it. I did report him to the dean and they said, too bad he's tenured. But we had this whole conversation and he was like, then what is cultural appropriation? And I was like, it is the cherry picking of a culture that you are actively oppressing. And then you are cherry picking what you want. And he was like, well, give me an example. And I was like, Halloween's coming up. There's a lot of girls who will dress as like Indian princesses. And he literally, this man looks at me and goes, well, what's wrong with that? I said, first of all, there is no Indian. That's not a thing. There are tribes. There's so many tribes. None of them had princesses. That's not a thing that's very European.
That's very Western. Yeah.
And then the murder of it all. So like, what do you mean? And yeah, literally was just like, yeah, well, like they're cherry picking our culture. And I was like, that's not what country music is. This was like a whole thing. Anyway, this went on for 30 minutes. No one in my class spoke up. I'm still mad about it that I just got to be that angry Latina in the room that day and no one said a word. But like, it is inherent. Like you can't claim it and you can't gatekeep it. It's an art form. And like, what?
Yes. I think we're going to have an episode one day and hopefully we can get some type of viewer participation on this of just crazy things my music professor said or just crazy things said by my music professor, specifically to do with, between you and me alone, between you, me, and Josh, just the 3, we could have about 8 episodes.
At least I could go on for years.
An audience afterwards.
Actually, fun fact: this already exists for because the year 2020. When everything was going down and they cut music funding, someone started a petition where you could include your stories. And I have a few that are in there. We should read those off one day. They sent it to the administration. There's a whole document. There's a whole list. I was in that. You read it. I know you were in that because I read it. Person at the time.
Yes, I read all the wild stories. Okay. Yeah.
I was in that, and I did mine anonymously because I was still working in the arts full time at the time. And that's the thing when we talk about equity in the arts is there, and this is kind of how Mike came into existence as well, is there are so few people that hold all of the power. And when you're in music school, and we did a whole seminar on the systemic power imbalances within the arts and within music schools, because like your professor, your studio professor owns your life. And like, if they don't like you, they control your job prospects. They control if you can go to grad school in a way that very few fields have. It's like having a coach on a football team. Like they decide if you play or not. And like,
I would even say it reminds me of like people with PhD programs, right? Like your advisor is the reason why you get published. But that doesn't happen until you're in your PhD. This is happening like in undergrad with like 18, 19-year-olds that are literally already have just that much of a power difference in place. So yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's why so many of those problems have come out, which maybe we can talk about in another episode of the issues within the gender inequality of it all. But that was something that, even at the time, even though I had been out of school for 2 years, I was getting my master. I'd already graduated with my master's at another school. I was working full time, and I didn't feel like I could publish my stories with my name. I had to do it anonymously. But there's like a whole document out there of some crazy stories of the things that that has had. But that's, so it's like, it's those stories of like, who owns art, who gets to decide who owns art, or who gets to do what art, and like all of those pieces, who gets to decide what art is good. Right. And I think that that's something we're just starting to like scratch the surface on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that just ties so well into what we do with the Preservation Project Archive, is recognizing like we accept all art because we recognize the value of all art, and not being like this, yours is good, yours is bad, or yours is worth my time, energy, and money versus yours, which isn't, because it's art. It's someone's gonna like it and someone else is gonna hate it, just depending on how you grow up. But that's why it exists. We love talking about it and why things are good and why things are bad. And we'll also get into the different eras of art, I should say, that we love and hate. Because I have a lot of eras that I hate.
Same. But so I think with the Preservation Project, that's something to reiterate, is just that all levels are welcome, all types of art are welcome. Like, we really want to make sure that everyone's included, because it's about the representation and the documentation of it all. And it all matters, because it shows that we existed, that we're here, that, it tells a story of different communities. And so I think, to tie it all back to the beginning and Lady Gaga of it all, Gaga, I think when she was at NYU, she dropped out of NYU, her peers were really mean to her and they thought that her art was terrible. And like, imagine if someone had sent in her art to be documented at that time, or if she hadn't done it because she thought that it was bad. And so I think like with this project, we are trying to capture everyone, because you never know who that person who speaks to a generation is going to be. And especially when we're under attack and we're being targeted, that voice might be lost because of this. And we will never get to have that generational impact unless we preserve it now. And I think that that's really what we're trying to do. And yeah, we just really want people to submit. So please, 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 if you're listening to this, if you're an artist, if you know artists, if you've ever heard of art before, submit. If you've never done art before, do it now and submit it to us. It doesn't need to be published. We'll keep it private if you would like. But we want it. We want it all. We want to have this documented and live in our archives so that it is protected and that we all are protected.
Yay. I love what we do.
The Music Inclusion Coalition is a 501c3. Your donations ensure we can continue our work, and they are tax deductible. If you have the ability, please, please, please consider donating and helping us continue this project.